Welcome into the FF Warriors podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Sweat. We're going to go over week two. Week two was crazy. A lot of action going on. We're going to go ahead and look at some news, injuries from week two, recapping some games, looking at some things that's really stood out to me, and looking at some actual historic performances that happened over the weekend. It was insane. So much action, come from behind victories. It was so exciting. Man, this season is going to be crazy. I can't wait to continue to go on this journey and going towards the fantasy football championships. I'm glad to be here with you guys. Stay tuned through the episode, and I'll go ahead and tell you guys as well who I think you should pick up that's going to help you towards that goal. So, starting out here, I want to go over some news and injury from week two. First, we got the main injury here. Trey Lance, fractured ankle, unfortunate. He had season-ending surgery today on that ankle, so Jimmy Garoppolo is going to take over there, and thank God for them holding on to him and not trading him. Really, I think a lot of people think that they're even better with Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, I know the passing game's going to be better. We really know what we're getting there, and I don't know about Trey Lance, man. I mean, it really sucks that he got injured, but maybe this is like a blessing in disguise for the San Francisco 49ers. Because they were already in the NFC Championship last year. I hope Trey Lance recovers and does well in his recovery and comes back strong. But right now, Jimmy Garoppolo might be the man for this job. Next, sticking with the 49ers, Tyrion Davis-Price has a high ankle sprain. Looking at he's out 4 to 6 weeks. Dalton Schultz dealing with a PCL issue. No real timeline for return on that. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Jerry Jeudy had a shoulder injury in game yesterday. Definitely left. Not really sure how long it's going to be. They're saying day to day, so that's something to keep an eye on. James Conner left the game yesterday with an ankle injury. There's really no timetable on it or really much to it right now. They are saying it's nothing too serious. Won't be a long-term injury, but he's going to be out. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as well. He is a big part of the Arizona Cardinals offense. So without him, you definitely want a piece of that offense in that running game as well. Mike Evans was suspended for one game today due to the brawl with Marshawn Lattimore in the game yesterday. That was a crazy incident that I watched. A lot of emotion in that game. All right, so that's the most notable news and injuries from week two. Moving on to a game recap. I'm just going to go over some of the games that really stood out to me and the performances. First game that I want to look at is going to be Carolina against the New York Giants. The game was Carolina 16, New York wins with 19 points. Baker Mayfield didn't really have a great performance, went 14 of 29, 145 yards, a touchdown, added 6 carries on the ground for 35 yards. No interceptions, but definitely nothing to write home about. That Panthers offense really struggled there. Christian McCaffrey went for 15 rushes for 102 yards. Definitely solid. Very good efficiency there. Only 4 catches on 5 targets, 26 yards. We definitely want to see more utilization from Christian McCaffrey. Still ended up with a good output, though. I think it was about 16 points. I mean, we're really just spoiled with previous years of Christian McCaffrey. That's still a very good output. If he had a touchdown, we'd be looking at 20-something points there. I mean, he's still a number one running back, and really a lot of running backs just didn't perform this weekend. It's crazy in the running back landscape. This was definitely a wide receiver week. Speaking of wide receivers for Carolina, DJ Moore, 6 targets, 3 receptions, 43 yards and a touchdown. We really expected more, especially with Baker Mayfield coming in. We thought this would be the best quarterback that DJ Moore's ever played with. But hey, at least he got a touchdown. He's had not very many touchdowns in the past, but definitely want to see more out of him. Hopefully he comes back looking good in week three. Robbie Anderson, 5 targets, 3 catches for 32 yards. Also had a fumble. Really nothing there. DJ Moore is the guy we want. We want to see a little bit more out of Christian McCaffrey, but that's not too bad. New York Giants, how about them? Undefeated, 2-0. Daniel Jones, 22 out of 34, 176 yards, touchdown, 10 carries for 21 yards as well. Saquon had 21 carries, 72 yards, 3 receptions on 4 targets, 16 yards. Definitely not exactly what we saw in week 1. but still solid. You love to see the opportunities there. 21 carries. Sterling Shepard had 10 targets, 6 catches, 34 yards. He definitely led New York in targets this week. Richie James came out of nowhere, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 51 yards. He actually led New York in receiving yards. He might be somebody to look at. I'm not sure what's going on with this New York rotation at wide receiver. Kadarius Toney's barely playing. Kenny Galladay, 2 snaps yesterday. A lot of drama going on. They're saying that he was cleared out his locker after the game. They might be looking at an issue there. They might release him, try to trade him. Something to look at. But, man, that's a lot of money that they spent on that guy to not even play him. That was crazy. Daniel Bellinger, rookie tight end. Only 1 catch for 16 yards and a touchdown. He might be somebody that might be a little more included in the offense going forward. So I would look at him going into week 3 and beyond. Just somebody to look at. I don't think he's going to be great right now. Moving on, next game I want to talk about is Denver versus Houston. Denver wins 16-9. I don't know what's going on with Russell Wilson and Denver right now. They come out with a victory, but it does not look good. Nathaniel Hackett and that coaching staff just don't look like they're really showing that they've never coached before. And I know a lot of their coaches have never really coached in their specific focus, never been in that position before, and it's showing. They really need to turn that around. Russell Wilson just not looking like the typical Russell Wilson that we're used to. Like I said, they still got it done, but only 14 completions on 31 pass attempts for Russell Wilson, 219 yards, a touchdown with an interception, added 2 carries for 3 yards. We definitely want to see more out of Russell Wilson. We know that he's capable of that. They really need to figure out what's holding them back, and Russell needs to just get back on track there. Javonte Williams, 15 attempts, 75 yards, 4 targets, 1 reception, 10 yards. Solid day, not a touchdown. Would have been better if he had a touchdown, but it's definitely a split backfield. Melvin Gordon, 10 carries, 47 yards, 1 reception for 6 yards. It's probably about a 60-40 split between them. Javonte Williams still has more upside in this offense. He's definitely more involved in the passing game, so he's your main 3-down back skill set there. Cortland Sutton, 11 targets, 7 receptions, 122 yards. He also added 1 carry for 5 yards. Cortland Sutton's going to be the man there. Jerry Jeudy leaving with that shoulder if he misses any time. He only was the one that got targeted after he left with the injury. And I just think that overall, Cortland Sutton is the guy to own there. Looking forward, next game that I want to talk about is Jacksonville against Indianapolis. Jacksonville shuts out Indianapolis 24-0. What is going on here with Indianapolis? Matt Ryan looks terrible. I don't know what to say about that. The offensive line isn't blocking as well for him either. I can say that. He ended up with 16 completions on 30 attempts, 195 yards, 3 interceptions, and a fumble. 4 turnovers for Matt Ryan. Definitely expect to see more out of Matt Ryan. He's a veteran. We know what he's capable of. Hopefully he can turn that around here soon. But I don't know, it's just something about older quarterbacks going to Indianapolis that previously were good and just not performing. I don't know if it's just because they get them when they're like 36 years old and they're just in the very big decline of their career. But that's an interesting situation. Jonathan Taylor, only 9 attempts. Are you kidding me? 54 yards. You definitely need to get your main offensive weapon more attempts. I don't care what the game script is. Losing 24-0. Jonathan Taylor is that offense. Especially you're looking at no Michael Pittman in this game. You have no Michael Pittman. You have nothing. Indianapolis struggled heavily. I mean, you can say that. Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. Pretty solid day, actually. 30 attempts, 25 completions. Pretty efficient, 235 yards and 2 touchdowns, 3 carries for 11 yards. Very solid. James Robinson really taking over this backfield. I mean, kudos to that guy. I didn't even think myself that he would respond after coming off the Achilles injury like he has. And, I mean, he's really showing people up. I mean, you can never doubt this guy going forward. 23 attempts, 64 yards, a touchdown, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 14 yards. I mean, it's definitely a running back by committee, but it looks like James Robinson is taking over this backfield. ETN had 9 attempts, 20 yards, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 33 yards. I mean, definitely not what we drafted him for in the 5th round. I mean, we have to hope that James Robinson has an injury, not that we're hoping that, but I'm not sure ETN's going to be living up to his draft cost. Christian Kirk, however, is a steal. This man is definitely living up to the money that they paid him for, doing exactly what they wanted him to do. 6 targets, 6 receptions, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns, pretty much ran a route on every single pass attempt. Same thing with Marvin Jones. He's actually taken over the wide receiver 2 job. He's the clear wide receiver 2. Also ran 29 routes. He had 5 targets himself, 3 receptions, only 33 yards, but he played on 64 snaps, ran 29 routes. So that's definitely the wide receiver 2 here. I thought it would be Zay Jones. He's definitely the wide receiver 3, and he's going to have his weeks. I really only want Christian Kirk, honestly. Evan Ingram, however, especially considering how the tight ends have been performing so far in these first 2 weeks, had 8 targets, 7 receptions, 46 yards. I mean, that's solid. That's somebody you could pick up if you're having some issues like a Dalton Schultz. Definitely solid floor. He might have some inconsistency. But that's the tight ends. Next game, we're going to go ahead and look at Arizona versus Las Vegas. What a game. This is another one of those games. Arizona comes back from behind. They're just getting demolished in the first half. Come back in the fourth quarter, tie up the game, end up winning 29-23. Kyler Murray, 49 pass attempts, 31 completions, 277 yards, a touchdown with an interception. Also added 5 rush attempts, 28 yards, and a touchdown, and also had a 2-point conversion. That guy's a magician in the backfield. Behind the line, you can rush him. He's definitely a task. He's very elusive, very fast. Definitely going to make plays, and they need him until DeAndre Hopkins come back from suspension. Rondale Moore has been injured. Greg Dortch is, never even heard of the guy before. He's got a funny name to say, Greg Dortch. But he's been producing, stepping in there from when they need it. Again, James Conner left with an injury here. Darrell Williams had 8 carries, 59 yards, and a touchdown. 3 targets, 2 receptions for 3 yards. Eno Benjamin had 8 rush attempts, 31 yards, 4 targets, 3 receptions for 20 yards. If James Conner misses time, we're going to look maybe further into this with the waiver wires, but I'm really liking Darrell Williams. Speaking of Greg Dortch, he had 4 targets, 4 receptions for 51 yards, a touchdown. That's pretty solid. He's definitely stepping up here, has a solid floor. Marquise Brown, 11 targets. It's funny, Kyler Murray was talking about how elite wide receivers need elite targets and 11 or better, and he delivered on that portion. But Marquise Brown only got 6 receptions, 68 yards, solid, no touchdown. You would expect a little bit more. Zach Ertz also got 11 targets, 8 receptions, 75 yards. It was a solid day. At the end of it, Las Vegas, Derek Carr, 39 attempts, 25 completions, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, added a carry for 9 yards. Josh Jacobs had 19 carries, 69 yards, 1 target, 1 reception, 12 yards. That's pretty solid. Again, no touchdown, but that's very good usage. This is definitely Josh Jacobs' backfield. Devontae Adams, only 2 catches on 7 targets, 12 yards, and 1 touchdown. Definitely not anywhere close to week 1, but you can't have a 30-point game every week. Still solid with the targets there. 7 targets. Hunter Renfrow. Oh man, Hunter Renfrow. He rebounded. He got 10 targets in this game, 7 receptions, which is pretty solid. 59 yards. But of course, as many of you probably seen, 2 fumbles, and they both happened in the very end of the game within, I believe, 2 plays. It was crazy to see. That's really the reason why Arizona ended up winning that game, unfortunately. It was nice to see Renfrow come back. He's also dealing with a concussion after that hit from Isaiah Simmons that caused a second fumble. So that's something to look out for. Darren Waller had 8 targets, 6 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown. He was the number 2 tight end on the week. Actually, I believe I'm watching the game, and Dallas Goedert's having a pretty solid day as well. But Waller, the tight end landscape this year is so ugly. You got maybe 2-3 guys a week that are, that you drafted, you expected to perform, that are performing. Other than that, man, it's a total crapshoot, and these guys are coming out of nowhere to be solid for tight end spot. If you didn't draft those first 2 tight ends, basically Kelsey and Andrews, you're in trouble. Waller is probably the wide tight end 3. We haven't seen George Kittle play yet. Now, moving on. Next game I want to talk about is Cincinnati versus Dallas. Dallas surprised a lot. Definitely an upset game. 20-17, Dallas wins. Cooper Rush looked pretty solid. When he came in for Dak Prescott in week 1, I mean, he looked terrible. I didn't think that Dallas would be smart to not make a move at quarterback and just let Cooper Rush come in there. But he proved me wrong. I mean, nothing spectacular, but he looked a lot better than I expected. He had 31 pass attempts for 19 completions, 235 yards, and a touchdown. No interceptions, no turnovers. He was a game manager. He did what he had to do. They ended up winning the game. Zeke, 15 rush attempts, 53 yards, 2 targets, 1 reception for -4 yards. I mean, definitely not what you're looking for here. Tony Pollard was definitely the more explosive back. 9 attempts, 43 yards, a touchdown, 7 targets with 4 receptions for 55 yards. I mean, Pollard is definitely the more explosive back. It's nice to see Zeke still getting, solid volume, but so far that hasn't really turned into much, especially with this offensive line for Dallas. If it wasn't for Pollard getting a big play, I mean, his stats wouldn't look quite as good either, but he's definitely the more explosive guy, which he's proven. And Noah Brown, 5 targets, 5 receptions. I never even heard of this guy until maybe week 1 of this year. 91 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he's just solid. He's been picking up the slack. No Michael Gallup. CeeDee Lamb hasn't really performed exactly how we would expect. He has 11 targets through both games, 11 targets each. In this game, 7 receptions, 75 yards, 1 carry for 6 yards. Played a little bit better than week 1, but this isn't the guy that you drafted in the first or second round. Still good to see he's getting 11 targets. I think that he'll definitely continue to be better, but it's not looking the best right now. He did end up with 15 points, but you expect a little bit more out of your second round pick. Cincinnati, 17 points again. Joe Burrow, 24 out of 36 for 199 yards, a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, added 4 rushing attempts for 26 yards and a fumble. I mean, Cincinnati is just not looking great right now. They're 0-2, lost on a field goal in the last minute in both games. That definitely sucks. Joe Burrow is not looking very sharp. I mean, I'm not worried about them. I know that they're going to turn it around. It's only week 2, going into week 3. And, I mean, the Super Bowl hangover is kind of real. I mean, this is a very talented team, though. I'm sure that they'll pick it up and look better going forward. Joe Mixon, 19 attempts, 57 yards, 4 targets for 3 receptions, 26 yards. That's elite volume. Joe Mixon has a very safe floor. In this game, think about 10 points, no touchdown. But again, not very many running backs really performed at a high level in this week. This was definitely a wide receiver week. Speaking of the wide receivers, T. Higgins comes back from the injury, doesn't miss any time. 10 targets, 6 receptions, 71 yards and a touchdown. He was the most productive wide receiver in this game. Jamar Chase, 9 targets, 5 receptions, 54 yards, added 1 carry for 4 yards. I mean, it's nothing to write home about. Not exactly the Jamar Chase game that you would expect. Hayden Hurst, tight end, 7 targets, 5 receptions, 24 yards. He's somebody to look at. I mean, guys getting targets in a high volume offense. We just talked about how tight end is not looking great for this year so far. Maybe somebody to look at. All right, next, I want to talk about the New York Jets versus Cleveland Browns. Wow, what another crazy game. New York Jets come back, win 31-30. Joe Flacco, baby. I mean, old man is coming in. He's doing his thing. 44 pass attempts, 26 completions, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, no fumbles. Led the offense. Looking at this running back committee here between Breece Hall, Michael Carter, and now Ty Johnson is coming in there, getting some third down usage. That's a mess. This was Breece Hall's best game so far. 7 carries, 50 yards, 1 target with 1 reception, 10 yards, and a touchdown. If he doesn't get the touchdown, he doesn't get 13 points. I mean, he did show he had one big play that he broke. He's so talented. His talent is coming through. I think it's a matter of time before he takes over this backfield, but for right now, it's an ugly backfield to look at. I wouldn't really trust any of them if I didn't have to. Michael Carter's, I mean, he's looked solid, definitely involved in the passing game. He had 7 attempts, 23 yards, 5 targets, 5 receptions for another 27 yards. I mean, he's got a safe floor here. I'm looking at the Jets to be behind a lot this season. The passing game is more fruitful for fantasy. Garrett Wilson comes out, rookie wide receiver, week 2, 14 targets from Flacco, 8 receptions, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, this is definitely a coming out party for Garrett Wilson. Top 10 pick. You definitely expect him to perform. He's very talented, but Elijah Moore is not really doing much right now, and he was a guy I was really high on myself. I'm very surprised. I don't know if it's just because Flacco doesn't have that connection with him, and maybe Zach Wilson will. I mean, and again, it's only week 2. Maybe things will even out a little bit more. He only had 3 receptions on 5 targets, 41 yards, 1 carry for -6 yards. Corey Davis, 4 targets, 2 receptions, 83 yards and a touchdown. I mean, pretty good for fantasy. Couple Jets wide receivers. Crazy to say. Joe Flacco's just really killing it right now, and he might be the starter for this year, even when Zach Wilson comes back, unless they're not in the playoff hunt or really competitive at all. Cleveland, Jacoby Brissett was pretty efficient. 27 attempts, 22 completions, 229 yards, a touchdown, interception, 6 carries for 43 yards. Nick Chubb, 17 attempts, 87 yards, 3 touchdowns. The guy killed it, man. 3 touchdowns, a hat trick. Definitely one of the best running backs in the league. He was one of the ones that really blew up today. One of the couple. Also added 3 targets, 3 receptions for 26 yards. Yeah, he's not typically involved in the passing game, but that's always a nice cherry on top. Kareem Hunt, 13 attempts, 58 yards, 2 targets, 2 receptions for 16 yards. I mean, he was pretty solid. I mean, Kareem Hunt always provides flex value at least. Both of these guys are going to be trusted going forward, as they always are. Amari Cooper definitely showed up. I wasn't very high on him coming into this year. He had 10 targets for 9 receptions, 101 yards, and a touchdown. I would definitely be looking to start him going forward if you weren't already, at least as a flex or wide receiver 3. Jacoby Brissett can at least support one wide receiver. Lastly, I want to talk about the record-breaking game, Miami versus Baltimore. What an amazing game. If you watch this game, it was insane. I mean, Baltimore was killing Miami for most of the game, but Miami comes storming back, ends up winning 42-38. Tua has a franchise record, went 36 out of 50, 496 yards, 6 touchdowns. Franchise record, 6 touchdowns, including having Dan Marino, Bob Greasy, and all the other legendary quarterbacks that have played for the Dolphins in the past. An outstanding game. Definitely looked at primarily his 2 wide receivers, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Tyreek Hill had 11 receptions on 13 targets, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle had a ridiculous 11 out of 19 targets, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Both of them went for over 40 points in fantasy. If you had any of them, you definitely should have won your fantasy week. It was insane. And what's going on with the backfield? We all thought Chase Edmonds was the clear number 1 back. I mean, I definitely thought it would be a committee, but Chase Edmonds came in here week 1 and looked like he was the primary, not exactly workhorse back, but was going to get most of the usage. Raheem Mostert comes out here, 11 carries, 51 yards, 3 targets and 3 receptions, 28 yards. Was a clear number 1 back in this week, and I don't know what to make of this backfield going forward. Mostert's definitely a guy to own. He might be the lead back, or they might just play a hot hand, or game plan dictates this guy over that guy. I mean, I would want to roster both of them and just see what happens over the next couple weeks. I wouldn't start any of them if I didn't have to. That's definitely a running back by committee. Chase Edmonds only had 5 carries, 33 yards, 3 targets, 1 reception for 8 yards. I'm not really looking to have any of the, while he start any of the Miami running backs. Lamar Jackson had an amazing day. Amazing day. This guy needs to get paid. Pay the man. 29 attempts, 21 completions, 318 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, had 9 carries for 119 yards, added another touchdown, and a fumble. The running backs, however, did not perform at all. J.K. Dobbins needs to come back immediately because these running backs just aren't cutting it. All of them combined 15 attempts for 43 yards. That's just putrid. Lamar Jackson is basically the running back for the Baltimore Ravens, but we all knew that. Rashad Bateman, definitely the wide receiver one there. 7 targets, 4 receptions, 108 yards, and a touchdown. He could have had a lot more at the very last play. He almost caught the ball. That would have been probably like a 40, 50-yard touchdown. Mark Andrews, 11 targets, 9 receptions, 140 yards, touchdown. 1 carry for 3 yards as well. Definitely an exciting game, a huge game. Those are the main ones I wanted to look at for games. Now, moving on to the waiver wire ads, I want to tell you who's a few guys that I think you should definitely look at for week 3 and potentially going forward. These guys are going to provide you some value. Starting off with the running backs. Again, James Conner went down with an injury. I'm looking at Darrell Williams, 9.4% owned on Sleeper. Again, he went for 8 attempts, 59 yards, and a touchdown. 3 targets, 2 receptions, and 3 yards. If James Conner misses time, Darrell Williams is kind of the guy I want to own. I watched the game, and I just know of Darrell Williams' previous history. I'm more confident in him. He's the guy that I would be looking at, but also Eno Benjamin should probably be owned. He already has a standalone role with or without James Conner being injured, definitely in the passing game. Tyrion Davis-Price injury. That brings Jordan Mason as the RB2 here, 12.2% owned. Again, Tyrion Davis-Price out 4 to 6 weeks. You never know. Jeff Wilson has a history of injuries in the past. You want to have the running back for San Francisco. Speaking of San Francisco, moving on to the quarterbacks, Jimmy Garoppolo, now a starter for San Francisco due to the Trey Lance injury. I mean, if you're needing help at quarterback due to the injuries like Dak, I would look at Jimmy G. If by chance Tua is available on your waiver wire, he should be picked up immediately. You heard what he did earlier. 6 touchdowns. Come on. Marcus Mariota is another guy that I'd be looking at. I mean, he's looking pretty good in this Atlanta offense. Only 19.3% owned on Sleeper. If you need quarterback help, again, I think he's a guy that you could look at. Carson Wentz is another guy. He's performing, doing very well. 54% owned on Sleeper. That's a guy that I want to pick up. He's had 30-plus points in the first 2 weeks. Moving on to wide receivers. Corey Davis for New York Jets, 17.7% owned on Sleeper. Went for 2 out of 4 targets, 83 yards, touchdown. He's had 13 or more points through the first 2 weeks in each game. Nico Collins, 21.1% owned on Sleeper. He's getting targets in the Texans offense. Had 9 targets this game, went for 67% snaps. That's a guy that I would be looking to add. But my number one ad for wide receiver got to be Noah Brown, 3.1% owned as of now on Sleeper. Again, I mean, he's leading the Dallas Cowboys in receiving for the first 2 weeks. I think he's still going to have value even when Michael Gallup comes back. Cooper Rush is still going to be starting for at least the next 2 to 3 weeks, I would say. And that's a guy that he has chemistry with. They practice together. Noah Brown is a guy that's going to help you now, and he can potentially have value for the rest of the season. Sterling Shepard is the last wide receiver I want to look at. He's always been good, just can't stay healthy. He's been consistent with targets in the offense so far. 20.6% owned, 10 targets in week 2. I would look at adding him. Now, a couple tight ends you could look at. Hayden Hurst, 26.9% for Cincinnati Bengals, 7 targets. I would follow targets. Evan Ingram, 14.6% owned, 8 targets in week 2. I'm definitely looking to add him to my team if I need tight end. Jawan Johnson, 2.1% owned, 7 targets in week 2, 40 yards. 78% snap. He's definitely the passing tight end in New Orleans. Isaiah Likely, 9.4% owned, 5 targets, 43 yards on 4 receptions. He's the second tight end in Baltimore. They use their tight ends a lot. And then a couple IDP guys to look at for you IDP people. Divine Diablo, linebacker for Las Vegas, 15 tackles, 87 snaps. He wears the green dot for the defense. That's a guy that I want to add and definitely keep. I think he's going to have great value. He showed a lot of ceiling this week. 15 tackles is insane. Preston Smith for Green Bay. He had 7 tackles, 2 sacks on only 37 snaps. I mean, that's a high upside for small utilization, and you can play him on the defensive line if you're playing on sleeper. He has dual eligibility. That's a guy that I'm looking at, especially if you need some defensive line help. Frankie Louvu is a linebacker for Carolina Panthers. 10 tackles, playing the middle linebacker spot. Took over for Damian Wilson. 68% plus snaps through the first 2 weeks. I would add him. Nicholas Morrow, linebacker for Chicago, 11 tackles on 68 snaps. He's playing on the weak side for Chicago, and he's somebody that I would be looking at. For DB, Derek Forrest, DB for Commanders. He's stepping in for Cameron Curl, who's been injured, and he's played really well. Second-year guy. Had 10 tackles week 2. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Cameron Curl or when he's coming back. Questionable past couple of weeks. And even when he comes back, Derek Forrest might have played well enough to take some of his snaps. Mike Edwards had a big pick 6 for Tampa Bay. Ends up with 3 tackles, interception, and a touchdown. He's somebody that's a consistent full-time player, and I would be looking at him. And those are going to do it. If you have any questions that you want me to answer on future podcasts, go ahead and email me at ffwarriorspodcast@gmail.com. Go ahead and email your question, and I'll answer some questions on the next show. Thank you for tuning in, guys, and we're going to go ahead and win some championships. Week 3, baby. Let's go.